What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I got an awesome position play episode for you. This is something I've been thinking about doing for a while that I'm kind of excited about. We're going to take a really simple shot, one of my favorite shots, and we're going to kind of build on it as to how I would shoot it if I was a skill level 2 versus all the way if I was a skill level 7. We're going to kind of use building blocks to kind of build on this shot and the position you can get from it. But first, let's look at the shot. Has this ever happened to you with this shot? It's the last ball on the table, it's hanging in the jaws, and you accidentally followed it in and scratched? I'm going to show you exactly how not to ever scratch on this again. That's going to be the first block as to just making sure you make this ball. First, let's talk about what the shot actually is and how it works. So we know how to make balls, right? We aim it directly in the center of the pocket to get that ball into. When they're sitting right in the jaws like this, you don't have to hit them directly into the back of the pocket. In this case, you can cut it to the right or you can cut it to the left. So you don't have to hit this ball straight in. Honestly, when they're this deep in the pocket, you can almost hit it anywhere you want to and that ball's gonna fall in. And we're gonna use that to our advantage as we go. But this is the first step in the process to know how thin or thick you can hit this ball and it still goes in. So once you got that down, you'll see that the cue ball will be impossible to follow it in once you realize you just don't need to hit it straight. And you can do this from almost anywhere on the table as long as you're kind of straight on it. We'll get to what I'm talking about that in a minute, but just don't hit it straight in. It doesn't matter where you are. Look, I'm on the whole other side of the table and it still won't follow it in. Here's a shot from one of my matches where I use it to get back into position on this side of the table. But before we get into position, let's look and see how we can use the cue ball off of that shot. So we got down how not to follow the shot in, okay? Now let's start trying to build on very simple position play, okay? No English, nothing like that. First, we're gonna break the table down into kind of what I was hinting at before. We're gonna break it into a couple zones. If you're not straight down the pipe, like where the cue ball is now, or somewhere within that range, I'm not gonna get specific with it, but we're gonna call that kind of the middle zone. But if you're really far off to the sides, in this case to the top left, we'll call that the high zone. And then the bottom, we'll call that the low zone, just for the sake of this video and what I'm getting at. Because when you get into those positions, things get a little weird. So we talked about not following the ball in, and we're just gonna cut it when it's sitting in the pocket like that. But let's look at what the cue ball does when you cut it. If you hit the right side of the ball, in this case, the cue ball is gonna immediately hit that rail and kick off to the left. And if you hit the left side of the ball, in this case, from the cue ball's position, from the shooter's position, you'll see that the cue ball starts running down the long rail. That is like a cheat code, easy position. Look at this. Would you be afraid of messing that up? Well, if you know how to shoot it like this, you're gonna get beautiful position like this and make this easy. If you would have shot it another way, you could have really hooked yourself. But that is a very simple shot, like I said, like a cheat code. Here's going the other way. If you just cut it a little bit that way, you'll roll right towards the 8 ball. This is where you start to work on speed a little bit. And you can tell that you can do this from pretty much anywhere. If you're getting on this 8 ball, I think you're good. So like I said, that works if you're in that middle zone. So sometimes you might not be in that middle zone. You might have to be kind of straight on it like this. When you look at this shot, this is kind of hard to scratch. And if you don't know that yet, trust me, this is kind of hard to scratch when the ball's center of the pocket like this, and you're kind of really far off to the side, in this case, all the way along the long rail. Now, if you try to cut this, like I was talking about, you might end up screwing yourself up a little bit and leaving yourself totally screwed. So when you get into that position from really far into the high zone, in this case, or the low zone, you want to hit it a little fuller, and you're going to have to just work on the speed on this one and not hit it very hard. Like I said, it's kind of hard to scratch in it when you're that far off and not down the pipe on it. So here's the same thing from the other direction. You're going to just hit it a little fuller, just a little fuller. I know it's kind of hard to judge when there's nothing to look at when you're just hitting the ball because it goes in no matter what. But you're going to use speed. You're not going to cut it because it'll kind of mess you up. But about cutting the cue ball and how much speed to use, that's something that I like to say that 4s really need to work on a lot and start to really drill into the back of their monkey brain. The thinner you cut something, the less hard you have to hit it, and the more the cue ball is going to take off. It also changes the angle. Let's take a look at it. First thing I want to look at is shooting the same shot we shot before, but just having it down, like being able to land it like this. There's nothing fancy about that shot. No English, okay? That's just hitting the same shot we talked about before. And these can kind of go weird, and we're gonna look at trying to justify how thick to hit the ball and how hard you have to hit it when it does that. So how thick you hit it is gonna change the angle coming off of it, and how thin you hit it as well. We're gonna go right back to those 3 zones again, okay? Just because when you start to really get out to the high and the low zone, it really starts to make things a little weird. Let's first start by looking at this low position, just to really hammer in what I'm saying when I talk about how thin or how thick you wanna hit this. Because now this is like a magic ball, right? You can hit it super thin, or you can hit it super thick, and it still goes in. You can hit this thing any way you want it. So we're gonna really try and start to manipulate what we can do off of this ball. First thing we'll look at is hitting this really thin. Here's an example of hitting it really thin. You'll see the white line is the line that the cue ball is gonna take. And the thinner you hit it, the sharper the angle is gonna be, okay? Likewise, the thicker you hit it, the wider the angle is gonna be. So this is just now beginning to build on how position play is gonna work from this shot, okay? I'm not talking about English. That's not right hand spin opening that up. That's just hitting it fuller. And the thinner you hit it, the more the cue ball is gonna travel. Newton's law, things that stay in motion stay in motion. And the thicker you hit it, the less it's gonna wanna travel. So here on this first shot, we gotta get back down table, right? And we're really low on this ball. So all I'm gonna do is hit this pretty full to widen the angle out, just like I just showed, okay? But when you hit it full, you gotta hit it kind of firm. And spending the time really hammering in that cut to speed relationship is something you really should focus on a lot as a 4. It will get you so far. Now here's another example where we're just gonna hit it a little firm to widen that angle out so we get good on this 8-ball. That's pretty good right there. Now, another thing you can do here, which most 4s are pretty comfortable with starting to use. I won't say it's perfect yet. I mean, every 4 is different, but generally speaking, there's top and bottom, right? So draw and follow, and that can help you too. In this case, we're not there yet. We're just gonna hit this a little full to widen that out so that it comes out and gets us over towards that 8-ball. It's not a great 8-ball, but hopefully you can make it. Now here's an example of taking that theory from the last little section about that cutting it. You don't want to do this. You don't want to send it down this way. You're better off trying to use the other shot where you bring it back to the right of the table and follow the short rail, but just using draw to widen that same cut up. Let's take a look at that. Now, one thing you might think you need to be doing is going rail first. Someone's gonna teach you that if you go rail first, you'll never scratch. That's not always the case. Look at these 2 rail first shots from this same situation, and I'm about to explain to you why they're not always the right call. Let's hit that in the next section. Rail first shape does have its right place, if you ask me, and here's a good example of that. But first you have to understand 1, 2, sometimes 3 rail shape to get to where you need to get to. And that's a little bit higher level. I'm not saying it's impossible for 4s. I've had 2s break and run on me in Vegas. You know, everyone's different as to what they are. We're using the skill levels as just kind of to put things in steps here as we go, okay? Don't take any of it too seriously. When you go rail first, what's happening is you're hitting the backside of the cut, a cut you wouldn't be able to see from where you're at. It's very thin. You can adjust it to make it fuller, but typically this is gonna come off very thin. And like we learned in the last section, the thinner it is, the more the cue ball is gonna wanna fly. And if you use any spin at all, it's really gonna fly. But the point of using rail first is to really, really widen that angle up, okay? We talked about hitting it thin would keep it straight. Hitting it thick is gonna open it up. Well, going rail first is gonna crank that door right open. Now, when you really open it up like that, you're typically gonna go 2 or 3 rails, right? So if you can't identify 2 and 3 rail shape or know how to use it, these shots often don't work in your favor. That's all I'll say. Let's take a look back at that same situation before. Now here's this. Here's 1, 2, and we could have maybe hit this a lot softer, but hitting this soft to really try and control it makes it pretty tough. Here's a shot where Ron tried to go rail first in one of his matches. Luckily, he didn't hit this very hard, but you would know that a single rail, just hitting one of those earlier shots we talked about, just hitting this thin would bring you to the easy side of the 8-ball. But he goes rail first, trying to get some action to get out of there, but it would have brought him right back to the short side. He would have been in trouble. Here's another case where I use rail first, but I put some spin on it, and the spin gets totally out of control. So let's take a look back at this example of the rail first and using 3 rails to get to where you want to. If we're gonna really crank open that angle, we're gonna use it to get over and back on the table. What I mean is we're gonna go from the left side of the table to the right and come all the way back to the left. So in this case, I need to get to the left side up there to get on this 8-ball. So you see, as I come into that 3rd rail, coming right in line with the 8-ball. If you get on this, I think you're pretty good. At least as far as making it. I've missed it before. Let's take a look at another one. Now here's another one, but we're gonna go the other way. We really wanna open this up to get it down there. However, personally, looking at this situation, chime in below if you disagree. I don't think rail first is the best option. I think it's better to use spin. In that case, using rail first, I came across the position. You don't want to come across the position. You want to roll into the position. So getting back over, not opening it up so much would have helped. So we want like a Goldilocks position. Instead of hitting it really firm and not using any spin, we said thin, open it up a little bit, thicker, open it up a lot, and then rail first, cranked it open. Well, to hit all that sweet spot, you need to use English. English is great once you get it down, and using this ball as one of the first balls you use left and right English, I think is what a lot of people do. That's how I first learned it, because you're immediately hitting a rail and you can immediately see what the left and right are doing once it touches that rail. So we're gonna look at the same shot I took a second ago, but in this case, instead of using rail first, we're gonna bring that angle in a little bit and just use spin. So I'm gonna try and hit right on the other side of that side pocket, so that way I bounce into position on the 8. That's probably a better option for this shot. The other one worked, but it's really because I dialed the speed in and I was coming across the position and I landed okay. Now, like I said, using spin is fickle. It's tricky, and it takes a long time to master, and it's something I probably never will, as you can see by some of these shots up here. But it really can get you into almost any position that you need it to. Let's look at another example here. I could arguably go rail first here, but being this close to the rail makes it tricky to do. I'm gonna kind of do the same concept, except I'm gonna use a ton of left spin to widen this out, and as soon as I hit that short rail, it's really gonna widen it out. I'm gonna try and have it have the same effect as going 2 rails. So like I said, the spin can kind of hit that Goldilocks position. You can just crank it up though, and really use it to do the same position we did with rail first. But to use these shots, you have to understand this 2 and 3 rail shape and why you're getting the position you're getting to, which is why I kind of put it into this category and not sooner, like in the skill level 4 range. Not saying a 4 or a 3 can't take these shots. One more thing I want to mention before we go into the higher range, something I haven't talked about yet. As you start to get this stuff down and using spin and all that, sometimes you want to overdo it. And I got to warn you, it is very tricky to hit stop shots and draw shots with these balls hanging right in the pocket. It's very easy to accidentally not hit it straight, and then you're going to lose the cue ball, especially if you're far away. And especially if you're in a high zone like this, that's almost impossible to stop right there, okay? You always want to try and use the rails as your friend. That same shot that we did on the 2 range and the 3 range, okay? Try not to get into a position where you need to use draw. But sometimes you find yourself in a position where you have to draw. Let's kick it up a notch. Here's one of those situations where you have to draw out. You got a ball on either side, so you can't use these rails that I've been saying are so helpful when you have a ball sitting like this. So sometimes you have to draw straight out of it. But these can be very, very tricky, and I'm going to explain why to you right now. Here's a situation where my opponent needed to draw out, just like I just showed you before. This comes up, and they're very tricky, I'm telling you. So let's look back at that shot that I was just talking about. The 8 ball only goes in the right side pocket, and I have 1 solid left. I need to draw straight back out of there, okay? So in this case, I don't need controlled draw where we try and draw specifically to a certain point. That's also very hard to do. But in this case, we just need to get the draw. But we also need a little bit of an angle from our draw line. So the same way that we can cut this ball any way we want it for it to go in and start to use those rails, the same thing comes into play with draw. You can hit this ball almost anywhere into the pocket, and it's going to change your draw line. So you can't tell what you're shooting at. Usually when you have a shot line up, you know if you draw where it's going to go. But in this case, you could draw anywhere. I could draw into either one of those balls sitting there. So you got to try and accurately draw out of that. In this case, I don't need to land anywhere specific. I don't need controlled draw. I just need the draw and to miss those balls. And I honestly came up a little short, but when you got an 8-ball close to the side pocket, all you needed to be able to do is see it usually. Let's take a look at another one. Same situation. I could draw into both of these balls, but in this case, I need power draw all the way out of there, okay? This is like the baby version of the Shane Van Boening draw shot. And if you haven't seen it, just Google that and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. This is like the baby version. But I need to be able to draw straight back out of this and get all the way down table. So when you're shooting this, you have nothing to aim at, right? Because you can hit that ball anywhere and it's still gonna go in. So you just need to hit it dead straight. Just need a lot of focus. Don't ever underestimate these shots. And I'm not saying only 6s and 7s can do these. A 4 could do this shot too. All I'm saying is these shots definitely require a little bit more attention than some of the other ones we've been talking about so far. I also want to point out that I've been adding a hesitation or a pause in my stroke due to one of the commenters that was saying that I was having too quick of a motion. It's helped my game so much. You kind of see it in some of these shots here, so thank you, shout out. Here's another situation where we're just gonna kind of use everything we talked about before. We're gonna use some outside spin, we're gonna cut it really thin, we're gonna use 2 or 3 rails. And this is just kind of putting everything together, and it's just kind of a fun example to show how much you can use this ball for, which is why I always bring it up in the matches. That ball is so valuable. Here's another example where, personally, I can't cut 8 balls all the way down the long rail. So in this case, I'm gonna use this ball, top, a little bit of outside, to get back in line and get as close as I can to this 8 ball. You could just tap that ball and just get out past this green stripe on the rail so you can see the 8, but I'd miss that shot. I needed to do something fancy to get up here so I can make this ball. And lastly, I wouldn't do one of these videos without showing this cool little trick shot that we all like to do. This you get hit with a ton of topspin, so when it kicks off the rail, all the topspin catches. It's like spinning its wheels, and it eventually catches and slows the cue ball down and holds it. It's just kind of a cool shot. There's probably a very, very specific situation to use that. I don't think I've ever used it in an actual match. I even had to shoot southpaw there to finish it up. So now that's about gonna wrap it up, guys. I'm just gonna leave a little montage here showing you all the places you can put the cue ball just from this shot, using everything. A little bit of spin, a little bit of rail first, a little bit of everything we talked about so far. And this is just kind of grazing the surface as to what you could do with this ball. But this is one of my favorite shots, and I just wanted to bring up kind of like how complex it can get. And if you're somewhere along these steps that we were looking at, maybe this could help you. Tell me what you guys think of a video like this in the comments below. Until next time, keep shooting.